Michael Thompson looked at the dashboard clock again, sure that at least 10 minutes had passed since he last looked. Every minute behind the wheel made him feel constrained. He wanted to return home as soon as possible to share the good news with his wife, Veronica. Today was his annual performance review, a complete surprise for him, since it was 3 months ahead of schedule. Even now, the meeting was replaying in his head. Receiving a call to his regional vice president's office, Michael walked in to find his personnel file on the desk in front of Don, his boss. The next 20 minutes could be described as a Michael Thompson fan club meeting, as Don moved from one glowing recommendation to another. However, Michael considered the last 10 minutes of the meeting to be the highlight of his day. Moreover, the culmination of his career. "I have discussed this with the other vice presidents," Don explained, "and we would like to offer you a choice between two positions." Michael could only sit stunned as Don continued. "Your first option is to officially take over my old position as head of the department," Don informed him. This was not entirely unexpected since Michael had already done this work. "Your second option," Don continued, suddenly smiling, "is to lead the team that will launch our new branch in Sydney, Australia." Michael was sure the look on his face was priceless, equal parts shock and confusion. Don, for his part, simply chuckled and waited for his friend and subordinate to process what he had heard. After a few moments, he picked up where he left off. "In short, you will be promoted to regional vice president and will be responsible for our Australian operations," Don concluded, holding out a piece of paper for Michael to review. These benefits were more than generous. Taking time to collect his thoughts, he carefully returned the page to the table and turned his attention to the bearer of such good news. "I would like to give you an answer right now," he began, "but I can't until I discuss it with Veronica." "I understand," Don replied. "Why don't you take the rest of the day off, and you can give me your answer in 3 weeks. Finally, Michael's car pulled into the driveway, the clock on the dashboard showing 2:05 p.m., practically bouncing in his seat as he waited for the garage door to open. He was surprised to see the garage empty. Veronica must be at a meeting, he realized, and decided to wait until she returned home to surprise her with the good news. After a few minutes of thought, Michael decided that he could take this opportunity to tackle the projects around the house that he had been putting off for so long. Quickly going into the bedroom, he soon changed into jeans and an old t-shirt and got to work with enthusiasm. One by one, all those honey things were crossed off the list. Finally, the only remaining task was cleaning his office. Strangely, she called him when cleaning was needed, even though they both actively used it. But that thought didn't cross his mind as he walked into the room with a large trash bag in his hand. He decided the first thing to do was clear out the mountain of clutter on his desk, so he went through each item before filing it away for archiving, or straight into the previously mentioned trash bag. "Junk mail, junk mail, junk mail," he muttered as he looked through each item. Suddenly, he stopped. In his hands was a credit card statement that he was sure Veronica had canceled months ago. He quickly checked the date and found that the statement was current. However, his eyes continued to move down the page, where the lingerie and men's clothing stores didn't stand out as much as the 5 rows from the downtown Sheraton Hotel. Michael's world suddenly closed as his mind wandered to those happier times in the past. Michael was the eldest of 4 children born to Henry and Janice Thompson. Growing up in Sandusky, Ohio, he was a bright student and attended Ohio State University on an academic scholarship, where he studied for a degree in information systems and technology. While he wasn't particularly shy, he didn't have the need to be particularly outgoing. He attended parties from time to time, made friends, and dated occasionally. However, his studies always came first, until he met Veronica Kelly. He found himself at an outdoor party, one of those last chances before the end of the spring semester when everyone left for the summer. People, perhaps realizing their time there was coming to an end, seemed to be more active at parties, playing rougher, being louder and more frantic. Anything could happen at these parties, which is why Michael usually didn't attend them. However, the guest of honor was a good friend of his who was finishing his last semester, so Michael decided to stop by for a few beers. It only took a moment, and chance brought them together. They were both standing in line for beer when someone accidentally spilled 2 full glasses of beer in their direction. Neither Michael nor the girl in front of him escaped this, he remembered. The beer that got on him completely soaked the front of his shorts, while the girl in front of him got it on her shirt, which was also completely soaked. Confused by his own condition, Michael found himself horrified by the stranger's situation, although in truth he couldn't help but notice how attractive she was as the liquid turned her white blouse into a sheer fabric. To her eternal relief, she suddenly had a large denim shirt in her hands, and Michael, left in only a t-shirt and wet shorts, helped her run to the nearest toilet, where she quickly put on dry clothes. Now that the girl was okay, Michael truly realized the awkward position he was in. Stopping only to tell his friend what had happened, he hurried back to his apartment, chalking up the entire evening to the capricious nature of life in general. 3 days later, he suddenly found himself face to face with the girl from the party. Standing at the door of his apartment, he found her absolutely adorable when she returned the shirt he had donated and thought it was lost forever. It turned out that she had asked around at the party and had spoken to his friend, the guest of honor, who had given her his address. They exchanged phone numbers, which led to coffee, then a date, then a long-term relationship that culminated in engagement and marriage. Michael remembered how all their friends said they were a beautiful couple, and he assumed that was true in Veronica's case. 5 feet 7 inches tall, weighing 120 pounds, with luxurious brown hair with reddish hues, a $1 million smile and green eyes, she had an almost enchanting beauty. Her body, while having all the right curves in the right places, was also remarkably athletic and toned. No, she would never walk the runway in New York, but she had a timeless beauty that could perhaps one day cause Greece to set sail for 1,000 ships. Michael was fine too, although he was one of those men who didn't really realize how attractive he was to women. 2 inches taller than 6 feet, he was slender and muscular, having trained in martial arts since childhood. Exercise was a great way to relieve teenage aggression, and it did a great job of strengthening his body, although most people didn't notice Michael wasn't vain enough to walk around half-naked for no reason. But they certainly were an attractive couple, and after graduation Michael went to work for a major player in information security and encryption, while Veronica used her business management degree to start working for a local charity as an office manager. Their wedding was simple. None of them were inclined to have horse-drawn carriages or flocks of doves for celebration. Instead, they focused on creating a wonderful event for themselves and their guests. This was proof that almost every invitee came to the wedding, and the church was crowded for their wedding. The reception was an exciting event, filled with laughter, tears of joy and happiness, as Michael recalled. But it wasn't all happiness and joy, and Michael soon remembered how, after 5 years of marriage, Veronica approached him to discuss having a child. By this time, Michael was already earning enough to cover all their expenses, and she was saving all her income so they could make a down payment on a house. It was the perfect time for her to stop taking birth control pills and for them to start building a family. It was an important decision, and they discussed it for quite a long time before he was finally convinced that they were not rushing into this decision. A smile appeared on Michael's face as he recalled the joy of their rapid attempts to get pregnant. Nights and more than an occasional day of wild sexual freedom. But the smile disappeared as the memories continued. Days and nights of trying to conceive turned into weeks and months, and they both eventually sought medical help to make sure everything was okay. This was not the case. To Veronica's chagrin, she learned that she was unable to conceive a child. Michael was her rock during this time, always there to support and comfort her, to provide some stability in her now chaotic world. He did everything he could to not only tell her, but show her how important she was to him, and that he was truly blessed to have her as a part of his life. Thanks to his love and support, as well as the services of a therapist, Veronica gradually regained her life and found balance. However, when pregnancy was no longer an option, Veronica switched to the opposite end of the spectrum and no longer wanted to have children. Adoption had become a taboo topic, as Michael soon discovered, as had Eva or other possible procedures. Instead, Veronica announced her intention to return to charity work, but this time as a volunteer. "I can get a lot more work done this way," she explained. "Before, I could only manage one office, but now I can volunteer for various programs that interest me." Michael truly wanted the best for her, and although he was surprised that she decided to just announce her decision instead of discussing the possibility like they usually did, he was again completely supportive and encouraging of her choice. As the years passed, Michael and Veronica, of course, became accustomed to their circumstances and lifestyle. They were no longer newlyweds, but still enjoyed youthful adventures of exploration with each other 2 or 3 times a week. Or at least they did until Michael's work had become so chaotic for the last 7 months. Between Michael's exhaustion and the sheer number of hours spent at work, their love life dwindled to twice a week, then once a week, then to once every 2 weeks. Don't get me wrong, Michael wasn't obsessed with his work. In fact, he noticed that he was the one responsible for the decline in their love life, and as always, he sat down with Veronica to discuss it with her. Veronica, as he remembered, had not said a word of reproach, instead explaining that she understood the pressure he was under and that now it was her time to be his support. At the end of their conversation, he made his own promise to get more rest and make sure he could give his wife the attention she deserved. And over the course of several weeks, the situation seemed to improve. Love returned to twice a week, then to 3. True to his word, Michael worked smarter, not harder, and focused on resting during the day so he could be with his wife in the evening. But the downward spiral began again. 3 nights became 2, then 1, and then biweekly again. When asked, Veronica explained that she was doing this for his sake, and that once the problems at work were resolved, they would more than make up for lost time. They hadn't made love in almost a month, Michael realized. He was so focused on keeping things under control at work and just loving his wife at home that he didn't even think about the last time they made love. Now it seemed he knew why she wasn't worried. But Michael quickly realized he didn't really know. He had his suspicions, of course, but he was not the kind of person who would allow suspicion to be considered a fact. Oddly enough, it was this realization that brought him back to reality. He needed to talk to Veronica, he realized. Perhaps there is a logical explanation for why these charges appear, and on the card he believed she had closed. Perhaps he was mistaken and was thinking of a different card, and these purchases were made for her charity work. However, there was a small voice in the back of his mind, doubting these possibilities. It was already after 7, and Veronica still had not returned. It had been over 5 hours since he got home and over 2 hours since he discovered the mysterious credit card statement. Michael sat in his office with 2 fingers of Jack Daniel's single barrel in a glass of ice and slowly sipped the burning amber drink, mentally running through different ways to start a conversation with his wife. Finally, at 8:05 p.m., the sound of the garage door opening echoed through the house. Sitting in his office, Michael watched as his wife hurried into the house with a nervous look on her face. When she saw him in his office, her nervous expression quickly gave way to a smile that didn't seem entirely out of place on her slightly disheveled face. I can't say that anything caught my eye, but everything seemed a little out of place. Her hair was a little disheveled, but not a mess. Her clothes looked worn, but not wrinkled. But overall, it was alarming. "You're home early, honey," Veronica said, still standing in the kitchen, as far away from him as possible, but still within his line of sight. "When you came back?" Michael opened his mouth to respond, but somehow the words didn't come out the way he intended. "Oh, recently? Where have you been, darling?" "Oh, I got a call around 4, and they said there was an emergency meeting at 6, she replied. "So I quickly changed my clothes and went there." Perhaps it was the bourbon that allowed him to keep his face neutral and friendly when the obvious lies hit him, or perhaps it was a testament to the man's character that he could stick to his principles until he had evidence one way or the other. Either way, Michael simply smiled and allowed her obvious lie to be the truth. Of course, Veronica moved on from the kitchen, avoiding the office, and went upstairs. As soon as he heard the shower turn on, his mind went on a completely different path. Taking a pen and paper, he quickly made a list and a plan along with it. About the rest of the evening was tense and relaxed at the same time. It was tense for Michael because he was now convinced that he should not let Veronica find out that he had caught her in a lie, or that he had discovered her using a supposed whole card. Veronica, on the other hand, was blissfully ignorant of all this and continued with her usual evening routine as if everything was fine. Citing fatigue, Michael rose early to bed, and when Veronica joined him later, he kept his breathing steady and slow so that she might have assumed he was sleeping. His acting was good, and she soon fell asleep after getting under the covers. The next day, Michael went to work early, completed his absolutely necessary duties in his dual position, and then told his secretary that he had an off-site meeting and that he might not return until the end of the day. Promising to keep his cell phone with him and on, he left his office to begin the really important work for the day. First, he went to see Bill White, the company's security chief. By avoiding any details about his situation, he was able to briefly explain his problem and ask for a recommendation for a private investigator. Bill, however, went one better and called to make an urgent appointment. With his name and address in his pocket, he finally left the building. Samuel Henry was a completely ordinary person, Michael noted. None of his features stood out, and Michael could easily imagine that this man could literally disappear into a small crowd. What was not ordinary was the admiration that Bill White gave him, praising this former police detective highly. "Why don't you describe the nature of your problem?" Sam Henry began as both men sat down. This time Michael didn't keep anything a secret. From discovering his credit card statement to outright lying when his wife saw him at home before her, it all came out. Alas for Michael, with this came the tears. He didn't cry when it all happened, but now that he was telling someone else about it, it seemed like he just couldn't stop. To his credit, Sam didn't look away or look embarrassed. Instead, he politely waited for the other man to regain his composure. Finally, the story ended and Sam continued. "To make sure we're both on the same page," Sam said soothingly, "you want my firm to determine whether your wife is cheating on you and provide you with all the information, regardless of the results." "Exactly so," came the answer. "At this point, all I have is lies, some inappropriate credit card charges, and a lot of questions. I need evidence in one direction or another so that I can correctly decide what to do with my life." Michael spent the next 10 minutes writing a check for a fairly large fee and also signing several forms that would allow recording devices to be installed in his house and in Veronica's car, since the title was in his name. After leaving, Michael went to an outdoor cafe where, sitting under a green and white umbrella set into an outdoor table, he called his bank and credit card companies, asking them to provide copies of the last 12 months of statements and send them to his work address. With that, he sat back and enjoyed the chai latte he ordered when he sat down. However, all too soon he found himself again immersed in thoughts about his life. Realizing that this couldn't be good, he returned to work and spent the rest of the day completing all the other unfinished tasks. The next week, nothing happened except Michael tried his best to act as if nothing had changed in their world. Somehow he managed to be the same old Michael that he remembered, including the gentle touches and occasional kisses that were part of their interaction. Luckily, Veronica didn't seem to notice anything that would indicate a change in his behavior, and the days passed. 1 week became 2 and nothing changed. Veronica and Michael still weren't intimate, and Veronica didn't seem to notice that they hadn't made love in over a month. When Michael finally received a call from Sam Henry, he practically stormed out of the office, quickly heading across town to meet the detective. Sam's expression, however, told Michael all he needed to know. "I'm sorry," Sam only said, placing the folder in front of his client. "All the documentation is inside, but let me briefly explain what we found." Michael's mind went numb. He could hardly look at the man opposite him and listen to his words. Sam Henry continued. "As you suspected, your wife is meeting a man at the Sheraton Hotel downtown. She meets with him twice a week, on Mondays and Thursdays, and at his home on Wednesdays. Photos and DVDs of video recordings that we were able to obtain are included in your package, as are transcripts of those conversations and calls that were recorded in your home and car. There is also an additional copy for your attorney. Once again, I am very sorry that your suspicions were correct." With that, Michael left the detective's office, heading back to his own. Sitting at his desk, he picked up the phone and called his boss. "Don, I need to come in and talk to you," Michael said. "Got time?" It took 3 minutes to get to Don's office, and another 10 seconds after Don saw the expression on his face to switch from pleased boss to worried friend. Michael told his friend about the situation at home, then completely surprised his boss. "I need the number of a good great divorce lawyer," Michael began. "And then I want to take that job in Sydney," he concluded. "Sydney?" Don asked. "You are sure?" "Don," Michael replied, "after all this, I need to go somewhere where I won't see Veronica in every building or event. I think another continent would be quite suitable. Besides," he finished with a half-hearted chuckle, "now that I don't have a personal life, imagine how much work I can get done." The promotion was approved with a start date of 3 weeks from that date. Don also approved a 2-week vacation at the company's expense in advance to give Michael time to take care of everything he needed to do before leaving for his new assignment. "Well, looks like you won't be able to call me boss now," Don concluded, ushering Michael to the door. "Until your next promotion," Michael replied with a smile. "See you in 2 weeks when I return to pack my things. Thanks again for this recommendation." Walking into his office to pick up financial documents he had ordered delivered to work, he quickly left the office for the day. At the appointed time, Michael entered the offices of the law firm Slater, Mills, and Hastings. He said his name to the receptionist and sat down, waiting to meet with the lawyer Don had recommended to him. Moments later, he was called into an office where he met his lawyer, Karen Mills. As he rose from the table to shake his hand, he noticed that she was tall, with dark hair, and very relaxed. In fact, her manner of communication began to have a calming effect on him, which helped when he began to explain his situation to her. From the initial discovery to hiring a private investigator and the results of their observations, he covered it all. Far from being distant and businesslike, she listened carefully and asked questions along the way. Before Michael knew it, he was talking all about the decline in their sex life, how he was to blame for it, and the steps he took to fix it, as well as the return of his love life problems a few weeks later. Finally, he finished. He was completely exhausted, just from confronting his demons. Karen reviewed her notes, then turned to her client. "So what are your goals?" she asked. "In this state, you have the option to file for divorce based on irreconcilable differences, which will be a formal procedure. As long as both parties sign the divorce decree, it will go through the court system and be approved within 120 to 180 days from the date of filing. However, if you want to get divorced for a reason such as adultery, then you will face legal proceedings, which will significantly increase your costs. In any case, since this is a no-fault state, the courts will not consider the reason for the divorce when dividing marital property. Unless otherwise specified in the decree, everything will be divided equally between you. This means that anything you did not bring into the marriage will be subject to division. She will be entitled to half of all financial assets, including your pension and retirement savings, regardless of how you file." "Wait a minute," Michael countered. "When we got married, we both worked. She decided to do volunteer work after we found out we couldn't have children. It doesn't mean she couldn't go back to work or anything like that. It doesn't seem fair to me that she can claim half of what I will earn in the future. There are options we can look at for alternative compensation, but it has to be something she ultimately agrees to." Discovering a dark, tough side of himself that he never knew he had, Michael responded, "Well, I think she would be willing to trade it for the reason for our divorce not to be made public. The charities she volunteers for are very selective, after all. Otherwise, I might just quit and not have any pension for her to get." They discussed the finer details of the divorce, and then he wrote another large check for her fees and left. Time passed slowly over the next week. Michael took care of the necessary arrangements for his upcoming move down under and rented a room at the local budget inn to serve as his base of operations while on vacation. In no case did he want his soon-to-be ex-wife to find out that he was not at work. It might have been cowardly to avoid confrontation in this way, but he had already decided that he would not pursue it any further until things were as settled as possible. Finally, everything was in place. He opened a new checking and savings account at National Australia Bank, changed beneficiaries on his insurance policies, pension and 401k plans, arranged for a new mobile phone that will work in Australia, and most importantly, got his divorce papers completed and filed from Karen Mills, handling several additional legal matters in her office. It was Thursday, he noted as he returned home, arriving a little before 2 o'clock, just as he had done many weeks ago. Again, a little after 8, she returned. This time, when she looked into the office, he was not there. Continuing through the kitchen into the hallway, she was about to climb the stairs when she heard his voice. "Veronica, we need to talk." Stopping halfway, she turned and put on a somewhat forced smile on her surprised face. "Give me a minute, honey. I'm all dirty and I need to clean myself up." "No, Veronica, we need to talk now," he replied. "It'll only take a few minutes, really," she continued, trying to climb the stairs as he continued to look at her. It was quite alarming the way he looked without any expression on his face. "It can't wait," Michael replied. "So please sit down," he finished, pointing to the sofa. "Stop being funny," Veronica suddenly shouted. The expression on her face was a strange mixture of despair and indignation. "Whatever you want to discuss will still be relevant when I return." With these words, she quickly walked up the stairs, slamming the bedroom door behind her. When he heard the shower turn on again, Michael made a decision. Walking into their office, he took a piece of paper and began to write. "Veronica, by the time you read this, I will have already started a new life. I wanted to discuss this with you face to face, but you again decided that your wants and needs are more important than our needs as a couple, a family, a marriage. There is a lot that I don't know about you, as I'm finding out now. I assumed this was impossible after 13 years of marriage, but it seems like this is one more thing I can add to the list of things I don't know. So what don't I know about you? I don't know when you started sleeping with Matt Lambert. I don't know how often or how many times you had sex. I don't know how you could come home and act like everything was fine if a little tense because of my schedule between us. I don't know if you love him, and I don't know if you were planning on leaving me for him. But what I do know is this. I know that the only time we discussed our marriage and sex life was when I brought it up. I know that I have never, either explicitly or implicitly, given my consent for our relationship to go beyond monogamy. I know that you used the money I made to finance this sordid affair, and most importantly, I know this. As far as I know, this is where it ends. I know that I have frozen our joint accounts pending the outcome of the divorce. I know that an account has been set up to cover utility bills until the divorce is finalized, and that all of our joint credit cards have been canceled. Yes, all. I'm including $500 a month for food and incidental expenses until you find another job, but your free ride days are over. Below this letter is a copy of my divorce petition. I kept it pretty general, using irreconcilable differences as the basis because filing for divorce because of your infidelity wouldn't be my first choice. You made me happy for many years, or at least until I found out about your infidelity. I would like this marriage to die a dignified death, not a dirty and ugly one. With this in mind, I urge you to find a good lawyer and review the documents carefully. I tried to be fair, or at least as fair as circumstances allowed. But there are a few areas in which I have absolutely no intention of compromising, and my lawyer knows exactly which ones. I won't wish you luck, as that would be hypocritical of me. Instead, let me wish you this, that you find what you are really looking for in life, and that you have the good sense to be content with it. Yours soon, ex-husband. Michael. The shower was still running, he noticed. Either he wrote his thoughts on paper surprisingly quickly, or Veronica tried to prepare longer. It wasn't necessary anyway. After collecting her copy of the divorce petition, he placed it, the letter and his wedding ring on the chair he was sitting in, went to the garage, got into his car and drove to the Budget Inn. It was almost 9 o'clock when his cell phone rang, snapping him out of the continuous replay of his failed marriage that was playing over and over in his head. Glancing at the caller ID, he saw that Veronica was calling and let the call go to voicemail. 10 seconds later, however, the phone rang again. After waiting until it went to voicemail again, he quickly hung up the call, then turned on the TV, which he was only partially watching. For the next 3 days, Michael kept to himself, either in the hotel or on several short shopping trips. Costumes were cleaned and ironed, accessories and small items were purchased and packed. Working quietly behind the scenes with Dawn, he arranged for the company to find and rent an apartment for him in Sydney and hire a team to assemble the furniture, which he bought and shipped to the site. Dawn, to his credit, did his best to keep the news of Michael's promotion and impending departure a closely guarded secret. Only Dawn and Lydia, Michael's secretary, knew about his big move, and Lydia was extremely unhappy to see what it did to her boss. But Michael still had his last week of work. So, early Monday morning, he returned to work, walked past security, through the electronic doors and down the hallways to his office. Lydia was both happy and sad to see him. Her boss, whom everyone enjoyed working with, was leaving, and it was hard for her. Dawn was also sad that his friend was leaving, although he behaved much better than Lydia. The two met a few hours after Michael returned and continued meeting over lunch outside the office. After telling Dawn how it went, Michael expressed his opinion. "That lawyer you recommended is amazing," he said, pointing a forkful of steak toward his mouth. "Is it true?" Dawn replied with a cautious expression on his face. "Why do you say that?" "Well, she really seems to understand," Michael said. "From the very beginning, I felt that I was not just a faceless client, that she listened to my wants and needs and took them into account. Thanks for the recommendation." To his surprise, Dawn began to giggle, then laugh. "You had me worried for a minute," Dawn told him. "This is not just a great lawyer, this is my daughter." At this point, a stray feather could have knocked Michael off his feet. Dawn had a daughter. Which one was a lawyer? Seeing the look of bewilderment on his friend's face, Dawn took pity and explained further. "Molly and I had Karen shortly after we got married," he said. "By the time she got to law school, she was already engaged. Her mother and I did not really approve of all this, but we realized that this was her life, not ours. Well, about 5 years after they got married, she caught her husband in bed with one of their neighbors. She was devastated, and after it was all over, she decided to specialize in representing victims of infidelity in divorce cases." "Well, she's a wonderful woman, that's for sure," Michael said, taking a quick sip of water to regain his composure. The shock of this discovery began to wear off, and he began to listen more carefully to his friend across the table. "She thinks you're a pretty great guy, too," Dawn replied. "She can't tell me any details, mind you, but she went so far as to say that you were much fairer and more generous than most she saw coming to her. It seems you have a new fan," he concluded. Lunch came to an end, and they returned to the office. However, as they walked through the front doors, Michael suddenly found himself face to face with a very nervous Veronica. "You're leaving," she screamed. "You're not answering my calls, and you've closed your accounts and credit cards. How should I live?" "Veronica, now is not the time or place for our conversation," he began. Seeing that she began to react, he raised his hand. "I will see you tonight at 7 o'clock at your house. We'll talk then." "We will talk now," Veronica exploded. "No, we won't," he replied. "If you continue to cause a scene, I will ask security to remove you from here, and, if necessary, I will call the police to escort you from the premises. I'll see you at 7, he finished, turning to walk through the security doors and back to his office. His day was ruined, and Michael went to Dawn's office to tell him he was leaving for the day. Dawn, having seen how things started with Veronica, had already called Karen Mills and arranged a meeting for Michael as soon as possible. "We need a plan," Karen said as he sat down in her office. With what I've been told about her behavior in your office, we need to make sure everything was done correctly. What do you mean? Michael asked. You intended to serve the divorce papers in person, she began, but there is no evidence that she received them, and there is no way to know how she will behave when you meet tonight. So, what are you suggesting? Let's arrange for her to be formally served with papers by a sheriff's deputy tonight, say around 8, Karen replied. If I hurry, I can arrange for the papers to be served by then. I only have a week left to hold out, Michael noted, and then I'm going to Australia. Then I strongly recommend that you take all necessary precautions so as not to be unprepared, came her response. They spent the next few hours filling out even more paperwork, with Michael signing a limited power of attorney that would allow Karen to act on his behalf in the divorce matter. Michael also made 2 recordings, the first of which was a video recording of him recounting everything that led up to this moment, from discovering an unexpected bank statement to hiring a private investigator, and finally getting a lawyer and filing for divorce. The second entry, however, was much shorter. When they had finished clearing up any loose ends they could think of, Michael suggested they go out for an early dinner. To his surprise and delight, she quickly agreed, and they headed to a local bistro known for its delicious food and generous portions. As they ate, they discussed possible problems and ways to solve them, and by the time Michael left to meet at his former home, he felt much more confident in his position. Michael knew things would be as difficult as he feared from the moment he rang the doorbell at 7. The first attempt to call left him standing on the front porch, and the second attempt did not yield a better result. After the third failed attempt, he turned to go back to his car, only to have the door finally open when he was halfway down the sidewalk. You could just come in, you know, came Veronica's voice. After all, this is your home too. Not anymore, he replied just as loudly, allowing his words to carry, perhaps to the neighbors. If the application is approved, the house will be yours. Once again, reaching the porch, Veronica stepped back from the open door and Gesturich invited him in, turning from the still open door and heading into the living room. Closing the door behind him, Michael followed her, noticing that the large beckoning envelope containing the divorce papers was still lying on the chair where he had left it. With this in mind, he quickly chose another chair, since he had no desire to share the sofa with her. You wanted to talk, Veronica, he said as the silence between them deepened, so I suggest you start talking. Apparently, this was enough to motivate her to action, and she began her verbal attack. You must stop this nonsense immediately, she told him sharply. That's not how marriages work. Is this what you wanted to talk to me for? He quickly counterattacked. You wanted to meet just to make ridiculous demands and state the obvious. Veronica was stunned. This was not how she expected their conversation to go. By this time, she had lived with her preconceived notions of what was appropriate for so long that it never occurred to her that she couldn't have both a husband and a lover, and that all she had to do was insist on having her way, and everything will fall into place. Michael, however, did not behave as she expected. And you're right, that's not how marriages work, he continued, adding to her shock. That's how divorces work. Well, I don't want a divorce, came her capricious response. Michael was truly stunned, to say the least. Where is the woman he knew many years ago? The one who had a clear head on her shoulders, which she used for more than just talking nonsense. Whether you like it or not, it doesn't matter anymore, Michael observed out loud, causing Veronica to glare. Dear, she tried to soften, you must understand that in our circle everything depends on appearance. Divorce just isn't an option. Suddenly everything became clear to him. Where it all went wrong, why she acts the way she does, and, saddest of all, why there is no hope for them anymore. As Veronica sat there with a smug look on her face, he put all the pieces together and looked at his watch and made a decision. Well, let me explain a few things to you, he began quickly but carefully. Firstly, although you are volunteering with a local social society, neither you nor I are part of that circle. Questions about whether other social beauties you associate with lead a non-monogamous lifestyle are a matter for them and their spouses. However, I have no intention of staying with a lying, cheating bitch wife just because it's more convenient for you. Slowly, the smug expression on Veronica's face gave way to shock and horror. Feeling that his words were getting through to her, Michael continued. Your decision to volunteer full-time did not include the condition that I would help you maintain your image or look, and I only remember one promise that we both had to keep. We gave it over 13 years ago, and we gave it in front of our families, friends, and our Creator. From shock and horror, the expression on Veronica's face quickly changed to one of victory. Perhaps his words weren't getting through to her, Michael thought. He decided to wait and see what she said next, and he was very glad he did. Our wedding vows, you mean? Veronica counterattacked. The ones where you promised to love, respect, and protect me in sickness and in health, in sorrow and joy, until death do us part. Michael simply nodded deeply, once. Well, dear husband, she continued, her voice now filled with venom, it seems to me that you are breaking those vows, since I am still here, for better or worse, and you are gone. Interesting interpretation, Michael responded quickly, catching Veronica off guard. She was confident that her logic would be more than enough to make him see the error of his ways. However, there is a problem with your memory, it seems to me. Now she was puzzled. She was confident that, using his own argument, she had a firm position from which to direct the course of this discussion. There was no other way this could have gone, she was sure. You see, our vows contained another important promise, Michael continued. We both promised to love, respect, and protect each other in sickness and in health until death do us part, but we also promised to abandon all others. Having a lover is not giving up all others, I must say. Glancing at his watch again, he quickly stood up and headed towards the door. Confused, Veronica stood up behind him and followed. As he reached the hallway, there was a loud knock, and as Michael opened the door, Veronica saw the brown figure of a sheriff's deputy in her doorway. This is for you, Michael said, moving to the other side of the law officer. Veronica Thompson, asked the man. Yes. You are served, the deputy responded, handing her a packet of documents. Deputy, said a female voice that Veronica had never heard before. Could you please take a good look at this woman and make sure she's okay? Yes, ma'am, he answered and looked at her carefully. As Veronica watched, the deputy and Karen Mills escorted Michael to his vehicle and watched him drive away before the attorney got into her car and drove off in the opposite direction. The deputy was the last one to leave, waiting for Veronica to close the front door before starting the engine and pulling away from the curb. Michael's cell phone rang while he was driving, and when he saw it was Dawn calling, he quickly answered the call. How did everything go? He asked. Well, I know where she got that crazy idea, Michael replied. This is from those society ladies she volunteers with. As I thought, our marriage is truly dead, and now we only need to end it with divorce. Well, I have another surprise for you if you want to take advantage of it, Dawn offered cautiously. Want to head down under a couple days early? I would love to, came the answer. Then come here tomorrow morning and pick up your revised tickets and itinerary. Your apartment is ready for you, and the building manager will be notified of your early arrival, Dawn happily told his friend. For his part, Michael slept like a baby during the flight across the Pacific Ocean. Veronica was slow to react, even after their meeting, and it was only 2 weeks later that she finally contacted a lawyer. Even then, she still clung to her fantasy that Michael would realize it was best for both of them and would come back. When her lawyer found out who was representing Michael, the discussion he had with her didn't leave Veronica feeling particularly hopeful, but she persevered. There will be no divorce. She will refuse to sign any papers. 2 weeks later, after hiring her lawyer, and almost 5 weeks after Michael left the country, Veronica found herself in the conference room of Karen Mills' office with her lawyer. A few minutes after they were seated, Karen walked in and Veronica quickly recognized her as the tall, elegant woman she had seen that night when the sheriff's deputy handed her the papers. Where is my husband? Veronica asked sharply. Your husband is not here, Karen replied. Veronica still did not know that Michael had left the country, and Karen was under strict orders not to tell her unless it was revealed in court. However, I have been given authority to act on his behalf in these matters, and have very specific instructions as to how I am to proceed in his divorce from Mrs. Thompson. Veronica did not believe it. Her own preconceived notions did not allow her to imagine that he had left her forever. "I don't believe you. I want to hear it from him," she replied in a capricious tone. "Very good," Karen agreed surprisingly calmly, picking up the remote control and pointing it at the TV on the wall behind her. Michael's face soon appeared on the screen, and he began speaking seemingly directly to Veronica. "Good afternoon, everyone. Today is November 7, 2008, and I'm Michael Thompson. It is now 4:47 p.m., and since my job will take me out of this area in the near future, and since I have absolutely no desire to see my soon-to-be ex-wife, I am making this entry to provide specific and hopefully uncontroversial instructions for my lawyer Karen Mills on how to proceed regarding my divorce from Veronica Thompson née Kelly. My full intention is to seek a divorce on the basis of irreconcilable differences, as I cannot accept my wife's decision to take a lover or lovers. To this end, I have drafted a divorce petition that provides for an equitable division of our marital assets, except that I keep my 401k and IRAs in full, and in exchange, Veronica will receive sole ownership of our home. Since it has already been paid, justice alone will more than compensate her for any money she may claim from those parts of my estate that I want to keep for myself. I have already made arrangements to transfer the title of her car into her name, and to amend the deed to the house once my application is agreed upon. In the meantime, I have made additional arrangements to create an account to pay utility bills, and to pay all utility bills from that account. I also provide a monthly allowance of $500 for food and incidental expenses at the discretion of my soon-to-be ex-wife. However, if she wants to continue buying lingerie and other items for her dates, she will have to find a job, as I have no intention of increasing my allowance to allow her to continue down the path that led to the end of our relationship. As for alimony, I am willing to offer alimony commensurate with her estimated income if she had not quit her job and instead received annual merit-based salary increases. I think this is incredibly generous, since it was her decision, and her decision alone, not to return to work after leaving. Her volunteer work was a choice she made herself, and I am not prepared to go beyond my suggestion in this regard. Finally, like our wedding vows, it's an all-or-nothing matter. This means you either accept my terms, all of them, Veronica or my lawyer will follow the second set of instructions. They are quite simple. If, for any reason, this agreement is not reached, then the grounds for my divorce will change to adultery, and I will name your lover, Matt Lambert, in my suit, as well as in the alienation of affection suit, seeking monetary damages, compensation for his role in the destruction of our marriage. I will make this a very public matter, put the information I have gathered about your affairs with your lover into the public domain, and, if possible, remind your secular and charitable friends of this incident. The choice is yours, Veronica. You can have a relatively comfortable existence without me, or a very uncomfortable existence without me. But as you may have noticed, there is no option in which you could have any existence with me. With that, the screen went dark, just like Veronica's future. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.